Imagine being so transparently ambitious that your own cabinet colleagues are begging the prime minister to sack you before you stage a coup, and doing it so publicly that newspapers are running quotes comparing the situation to the Titanic. That's where Wes Streeting finds himself right now, with senior labor figures urging Keir Starmer to pull a Kemi Badenoch and brutally axe the health secretary before he becomes an existential threat to Starmer's already crumbling authority. We're talking cabinet ministers openly briefing that Streeting's breaching collective responsibility, attacking Number 10, running what amounts to a leadership campaign from inside government, and using newly elected MPs as his personal hype squad, telling anyone who will listen it's time to replace Starmer. His team's hitting back, claiming this is all just jealousy and distraction from his brilliant NHS reforms. But when 3 separate cabinet ministers are anonymously demanding your head, you've got a problem that goes way beyond normal political rivalry. So let's dive into this beautiful labor civil war, figure out whether Streeting's genuinely plotting or just spectacularly tone-deaf, and explore whether Starmer's got the stones to actually fire someone, or whether he'll just let this fester until it destroys what's left of his authority. The comparison to Kemi Badenoch sacking Robert Jenrick is absolutely delicious because it sets up a direct challenge to Starmer's leadership style. Badenoch identified Jenrick as a threat, someone positioning himself as an alternative leader, someone whose presence in the shadow cabinet was becoming more problematic than beneficial. So she moved decisively, sacked him, reasserted her authority, and made clear she won't tolerate rivals operating within her team. It was brutal, it was controversial, but it was decisive leadership. The cabinet minister urging Starmer to do the same is essentially saying you need to show some backbone and deal with your Wes Streeting problem before it metastasizes into a full-blown leadership challenge. The accusation that Streeting's repeatedly breaching collective responsibility is serious, because that's a fundamental constitutional convention. Cabinet collective responsibility means ministers publicly support all government decisions, regardless of private disagreements. You can argue your position behind closed doors, but once a decision's made, you defend it publicly, or you resign. Ministers who openly attack government policy or Number 10 itself are violating that principle. If Streeting's doing this, as the cabinet minister claims, that's not normal political jockeying. That's insubordination that should trigger dismissal. The claim that he's attacking Number 10 and undermining all of them suggests this isn't just about policy disagreements. Number 10 is where the prime minister sits. It's the center of government. Attacking Number 10 is attacking Starmer's leadership directly. And if other cabinet ministers feel undermined by Streeting's behavior, that's poisoning collective government effectiveness. You can't run a coordinated administration when one minister is openly working against the center and other ministers feel sabotaged. The detail about MPs from the 2024 intake telling anyone who will listen it's time to replace Starmer with Streeting is absolutely explosive if true. That's not speculation or interpretation, that's organized political activity aimed at leadership change. New MPs being recruited as Streeting supporters and actively promoting his candidacy while Starmer's still prime minister is the definition of plotting. It doesn't matter whether Streeting's directly coordinating it or whether ambitious allies are doing it on his behalf, the effect is the same: active destabilization of the current leadership. The second cabinet minister calling this behavior wild captures how unusual and blatant this apparently is. Political ambition is normal. Positioning yourself for future leadership is expected, but there are unwritten rules about how you do it. You don't openly campaign against a sitting leader from within their government. You build support quietly. You wait for the right moment. You maintain plausible deniability. If Streeting or his allies are being this obvious about it, they've either completely lost discipline or they've concluded Starmer's so weak that they don't need to hide anymore. The threat that if Streeting doesn't bring it to a head, he'll have to be brought to heel is fascinating because it reveals internal calculations about timing. Some faction within cabinet apparently thinks forcing a confrontation might actually be better than letting this simmer. Either Streeting makes an open move for leadership, which Starmer can decisively crush, or Starmer proactively slaps him down and reasserts authority. The worst option is the current situation, where everyone knows what's happening but nobody's addressing it directly. The third cabinet minister's assessment of Streeting is psychologically brutal, saying he's exactly the same as he was when he was 18, that becoming Labour Prime Minister is his entire life's purpose, and that he'll consider his life a failure if he doesn't achieve it, is cutting deep into personal motivation. It's saying this isn't about policy or ideology or serving the country, it's about ego and personal ambition. Whether that's fair or not, the fact that cabinet colleagues perceive Streeting this way and are willing to say it to journalists shows the depth of hostility toward him. The acknowledgement that yes, Streeting's been pushing the boundary of what's acceptable is huge because it's not even denying the accusations. It's confirming that he's been testing limits, seeing how far he can go before triggering consequences. That's exactly the kind of behavior that requires decisive response from leadership. If you let someone keep pushing boundaries without imposing costs, they'll keep pushing until they cross lines that can't be uncrossed. Streeting's spokesman's response is interesting because it tries to reframe the whole thing as jealous rivals attacking him for being too successful at his job. The waiting lists falling, ambulances arriving faster, these are real achievements, if accurate. And framing the internal briefing as incredibly stupid when Reform and Tories are fighting each other is tactically savvy, pointing out that Labour is damaging itself by having public civil wars when opponents are distracted with their own problems. The claim that Streeting's out there making the case for Keir and Labour is direct rebuttal of the disloyalty accusations. But here's the thing, all those defensive points can be true, and Streeting can still be undermining Starmer. He can be delivering good results at health while simultaneously running a shadow leadership campaign. He can be publicly defending Labour while his allies brief that Starmer needs to be replaced. The two aren't mutually exclusive, and the very fact that his spokesman has to issue this kind of aggressive denial suggests the accusations have enough substance that they need rebutting. Number 10's response is the classic leadership dilemma of trying to project unity when everyone knows there's a massive problem. Praising Streeting's work, emphasizing government delivery, saying he's a key player in the team, all standard stuff when you're trying to downplay internal conflict. But nobody's actually addressing the substantive accusations about disloyalty and leadership positioning. It's talking around the issue rather than confronting it. The Titanic reference from the minister rallying round Starmer is darkly comic but also genuinely damning. The people wouldn't have been out of place on the bridge of the Titanic is saying these expressions of support are futile gestures that won't prevent disaster. The iceberg's already hit, the ship's going down, and declarations of confidence in the captain are just rearranging deck chairs. If that's how ministers supporting Starmer feel about the situation, his leadership's in dire straits. The background context about Streeting's long-standing leadership ambitions is crucial. This isn't sudden, unexpected behavior. It's entirely consistent with what he said publicly for years. Saying in 2023 he'd die happy if he got to lead Labour isn't shy or coy. It's openly declaring ambition. Politicians who want to be leader but know they need to wait usually deny any ambition and insist they're completely focused on current role. Streeting's never bothered with that pretense. He's been clear about wanting the top job eventually. The question is whether eventually has become now in his mind. The polling about Starmer's falling popularity creates the context where leadership challenges become thinkable. If Starmer was riding high, beloved by the public, delivering electoral success, nobody would dare move against him. But his numbers are catastrophic. Labour is hemorrhaging support. Local elections are being cancelled to avoid the massacre. That creates opportunity for ambitious rivals. If the ship's sinking anyway, why not try to become captain and maybe steer it differently? The calculation changes when the status quo looks doomed. The betting markets and media speculation naming Streeting as frontrunner for leader creates a self-fulfilling dynamic. Once you're publicly discussed as the likely next leader, you become the focal point for everyone dissatisfied with current leadership. MPs who want Starmer gone look at who's available, and Streeting's the obvious alternative being talked about. So support coalesces around him even if he's not actively organizing it. Though given the accusations from cabinet colleagues, he almost certainly is organizing it. The denial of plotting is standard because you can't openly plot against a sitting leader from within their government without triggering immediate sacking. You have to maintain the fiction of loyalty while positioning for succession. Streeting's confident style and strong NHS record are real assets that make him credible as alternative leader. If he's genuinely reduced waiting lists and improved ambulance times, that's concrete achievement he can point to, versus Starmer's abstract missions and endless U-turns. The fundamental question is whether Starmer can afford to sack Streeting. On one hand, tolerating this level of disloyalty destroys your authority completely. Other ministers see that you won't act even when someone is obviously undermining you, so they lose respect and discipline erodes further. On the other hand, sacking your health secretary when the NHS is the government's top priority and he's apparently delivering creates its own massive problems. It looks panicky, threatened, weak, and it makes Streeting a martyr who can criticize from outside while his supporters inside government continue destabilizing. There's also the risk that sacking Streeting triggers the very leadership challenge it's meant to prevent. He resigns from cabinet, immediately launches a bid for leader, and suddenly the internal speculation becomes open warfare. Maybe he's got the numbers, maybe he doesn't, but the fight itself is devastating for Labour. Starmer probably calculates that keeping Streeting inside the tent pissing out is less dangerous than letting him outside pissing in, even if the current situation is clearly unsustainable.